me just start my server so y'all can kind of visually see where I'm at, and then so basically I'm doing a live stock update, and it's supposed to spit out the stock symbol and the price right there. And so the problem I'm running into is, oh shoot. So as far as the code goes, here is the server. I've got the server going. This is the API right here. And I just put in Apple right there to return Apple. And it has different modules within it. So when you look at the actual documentation, that you can add other arguments, or you can add other things to the array to access different modules. Like you can get a summary detail, you can get earnings, calendar events. So I'm just doing price, which, let me find the price. So if you look in this JavaScript right here, I'm doing my XML request. Got price equals response text. In that div that I have, it just puts a little span with the stock symbol. Then it's supposed to have price dot symbol, which is referenced down right here, and then price dot regular market price, which is, it's up here somewhere, but that's yeah, there it is, regular market price right there. And so the problem I'm having is, I guess I'm not getting, like, it's not console logging. So it says failed 404, and I'm thinking my problem is right here in the response.send. I'm not really sure what to put right there to make it work. I've tried quotes, I've tried quote, I've tried price. I'm not really sure what I need to be doing right there to get it to function. I feel like that's the last thing I need to do to, like, get it to work, because I'm getting the data down here.
Correct. And you're getting the data down there because line 10 is logging the quote information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So line 10, when the data comes back from this API request, Yahoo Finance is an object that gives us methods, like you're using the quote method of that object.
Mm-hmm.
The data doesn't exist until that callback
Return
happens. No, so that function that says error and then quotes, that is the only time and the only place this information exists. Okay? The problem is you're building a web server, and so when you request the information with app.get, that information does not exist. Yahoo Finance is a object that you cannot send with res.send. What you want to do is copy everything from line 6 to line 11 and put it inside of your callback for app.get. And then instead of doing console.log quotes, you want to do res.send quotes. Res is your response object. So whatever res is what is sending content back to the browser. Res.send also closes the connection. So you can only have one res.send. Yep. And that needs to be inside that callback function. This is one of the big challenges with JavaScript because it is asynchronous, and we solved that yesterday when we were building our little weather picker app. We had to turn it into an event emitter, but because Yahoo Finance is giving us a callback function, it's letting us know when the information is ready. That's when we need to send the content back to the browser. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's restart your server. see if this works now. Or at least see if we get different data back. Okay, so now you're getting price information. Right, that object that wasn't showing up before is now showing up in your debug console. So you probably have something a little bit wrong with your XML, with your return. Right, so you're doing you console.log price. So it should be price, and price itself is an object. So it's going to be price.
Oh, okay. So would it be price square bracket?
No. Let's make that a little bit bigger. It's hard to tell what it's doing here. Let's excuse me. Your browser.
Right here.
Yeah, just make that browser window bigger.
What am I doing? Sorry.
And then make your console bigger. So price. Let's just make sure we have some of these values in here. What are the two that you're looking for? Stock symbol.
So
and price.
I'm doing. Yeah, here it might be easier to see in the documentation.
Yeah, but the documentation we can't rely on this. What we have here is the actual data.
Okay.
Yeah, so let's just find the values in here. Like the documentation may be out of date, and it's probably correct.
Gotcha.
But whatever, like you see where it says stock symbol undefined, it's telling us that it doesn't have that variable. So we're missing something.
So there's regular market price, which I have.
Where's it? Okay, regular market price. Let's look at your code now. Let's do this instead of document. We'll leave lines 6 through 8, but let's first just on our own see if we can get those values. So let's just console.log price.symbol. It's like break this apart into individual little components. You don't have to restart your server for your HTML, but yep. Reload.
Yeah.
Okay. So on line 14, we've got an invalid token. Yeah. Cool. Save and reload the page. Yeah, so it's undefined. So we're referencing this object incorrectly. Oh, it's because, So go back to your code. We're getting response text. What do we have to do to turn this into an object? This is text right now.
Okay. So I need to.
And that needs to be uppercase,
So I think
uppercase JSON.
So I think you told me this earlier. Could I, instead of doing this right here, could I do JSON send or res JSON, or will that be different?
Let's just try this first, and then we'll explore that as a thing.
Okay.
So JSON is going to do a bunch of extra stuff that we probably also want. You probably do want to send it as JSON, but it's gonna like set the encoding type. All right. So now we can see that it's an object. Okay, it's a price object. Okay, so it's price.
Oh, so it needs price.price.
Yep, price.price.symbol, price.price.market price.
So it's an object within an object.
Yep. And reload over on the left. And there you go.
Cool.
Nice. What questions do you have? Maybe we want to go back and look at the server, because that part, it felt like was causing you the most sticking points, right? So you're correctly calling the Yahoo Finance. You're turning that into an object. You're saying require this object. But down on line 19, you're creating the route. And we'll spend way more time today talking about routes. Routes are a URL that Express is going to know what to do when you request it. So when you say app.use express.static and you give it a folder name, that is telling Express, hey, if you ask for a file like index.html or whatever, if the file exists, send it. If not, right? So it's going through this list of like, what do I know how to respond to, right? If you typed in some gibberish up here, like localhost 3000/Andrew, that file doesn't exist and there's no route defined for it. So Express is going to respond with a 404.
I don't think you saved it.
Ah.
Look at Leah doing some live QA. Nice.
I like it. All right. Let's see if we get an update now. Cool.
Very impressive.
It's doing what it says. So.
Yep. Awesome.
So yeah, that's what was getting me. I was like, why is I couldn't connect that and that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gregory.
I got a question for Andrew. Can you find out any stock market for any company? How will I save this if you up live this right now? How if I go on your website and type in a company, how will it pick it up?
So I think the way I would need to do that is I would need to create an input field and a button, and that would somehow reference this right here.
There's two other options, right? Just using Express, you're exactly right. If you put in an input and had to do that, right? But the request object, REQ, has request.params. That's going to have all your query parameters. So you could just put a question mark and symbol equals whatever in your browser.
Oh, up here?
Yeah. So if you were to, for example, slash question mark
slash question mark. Then REQ params?
No, just anything, right? You could put like ticker equals and put in Netflix or whatever. The request object on line 19, when it calls stock price and it says rec and res, rec has request.params, which has query parameters in it. There's another thing that you could do, which is, so there's a bunch of different ways to get data out of the request. And so you can either use query parameters, or if you're posting it with a form, you can get post information, or we could do this with the route itself. So you could say stock price / Tesla would give us Tesla's information. Maybe we should explore that first, because I want to spend a lot of time this afternoon talking about routes. So maybe I'll take over from here and we'll just continue to build on this kind of thing. And we'll show off a few examples. Cool. Very good, though. That was excellent work, Andrew. All right.
Thanks.
It's very impressive.
All right, we're going to start from scratch. We're just going to make a super duper simple, lightweight Express app so we can explore each of these things we've been talking about, because I think it's important to let's break it down to the basics. So I'm going to make a directory called Express. Right? I'm going to cd to this, and then I'm going to npm init, and we'll call this Express app. Express app. Cool. Version 1. Right. All this is fine. No Git repository. Yes. Okay. So this is a node module right now. I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. Cool. Open folder. let's actually rename the folder so that we don't cause ourselves issues with the module we want to run. Move Express. What did I call it? Express app. Great. And Visual Studio Code. Folder. Cool. All right. So we're kind of at a blank Express app, right? We've got all that's in here is our package JSON. I'm going to pull up a terminal. I'm going to create an index.js, and we'll just kind of start playing from here. Let me switch this to get bash. Delete that one. Great. So what do we need first? We need how do I start an Express app? When I have to pull in the package? How do I pull in a package?
Do you do const express equals require express?
Yep. Okay. Right, and right now, if I run this code, what's going to happen?
Nothing right now because we didn't set up a request to get. We set up the code to register, but we didn't set up what they want to get yet.
Well, the first problem is if I run this is valid JavaScript, right? We got a variable, and we say it equals whatever the return of this function is. Okay. What is going to be the Andrew? You still sharing your screen if you weren't aware. Anyway, so if we run this, right, we have not yet installed the Node module Express in this package. So if I run that, node index.js, it's going to tell us module not found. So the very first thing we need to do is npm install Express. That gets us ready. Okay, and now if I run this, right, run node index.js, the file runs because all we're doing right now is just creating a variable, right? The next thing we do with Express is we say const app equals Express, right? Just using this value, this variable that we created. It's a function, and when we run it, it returns a web server object. Okay, we can call this whatever we want. This could be my web server can be called Eric. The variable name is completely up to us. The reason we pick app is that most tutorials are they're gonna say app. So it's just a convention, but what we choose to name our variables is completely up to us. Okay, if I run this now, it's gonna run and do nothing. Right? It created a server, but there's nothing there. Right? It's not listening on a port. So as soon as we finish, it's done. The next component that we have to have is app.listen, right? And we give it a port number here, right? Let's do port 3030. We just pick any port we want as long as it's available. And if I run this now, it's going to listen and not exit the program. The server is up and running. Okay? So if I go to localhost right now, localhost 3030, okay, and I hit enter, it's going to give us cannot get slash. The reason it's telling us this is because we have no routes for slash defined. From here, where we're up and running, we need to define our routes. A route is a URL that Express knows what to do with. One of the ways we've been exploring this recently is we'll say app.use express.static, and we'll put in a folder name. So we'll say, HTML. And if I run this, if I create a folder called HTML, any information in here, if it's a file, if I can make, test.html, I can make index.html, and I'll just say index, right? And then in here I'll just say test, so we know what file we're in. If I restart my server with Control-C and then run it again, if I go to this now, it's giving us the index page. If I type /test.html, it will serve the test page, right? Any static file, a static file is one of these that are in here, that it finds in the path, it's going to serve it out, right? It could serve images, it could serve HTML, it could serve text files, PDFs. But anything that it can't find, it is going to return a 404. Remember, 404 means file not found, and it's going to tell us a little message, cannot get that file. It doesn't know what to do with it. But This is using static files. We can also define our own routes, which Andrew was showing off with his stock ticker thing, where we can say app and then a method of the request. So we'll say app.get and we'll say, secret. Right? And this can be anything we want, right? We can name it secret.html. We just don't have to. Anything that we put in here, if the path after the server name matches this, everything after the slash or after the port, it will serve this content. And then what we put in here is a function. It has 2 arguments. The first is request. The second one is response. Okay? And what the request object has is information about our request. So it's stuff like, were there any query parameters? Did I, what type of browser am I using? All of that information about the request goes in the request object. Everything about the server's response back to us goes out through the response object. So all we need to make this work, right, at a minimum, is we can just say response.send, and we'll say, secret page. Okay? And if I reload this server now, down here in the bottom, and I go to secret.html, we get secret page. Okay? All of Express is exactly this simple. It is a server that lets us choose what to send back to the browser. Whether it's a static file that it knows to pull from here, or if we're writing routes ourselves and capturing information in here. So let's dive a little deeper into here, right? I'm going to change this to secret, or maybe I'll call this params, right? So now I will have a params page, okay? And if I reload my server, I have params, right? The information being sent back to the server is always sent from this, right? If I put more lines of code in here, like console.log hello, right? That will should theoretically also fire. Yeah. So this function is being called when we request the params page. So let's take a look at some of the information that we have available to us. So rather than just in the browser previously, we've been using console.log everywhere, and it's still a good idea to use this in Node. But one of the things that we can do for debugging is that we can just include information here, right? We could do json.stringify, right? And then we'll do request, right? So we're going to turn the request object itself into a string and then send that out to the browser, right? So we can come in here and say, I got to restart my server, and then I'll reload. Converting circular structure to JSON. Okay, that's a problem. How can we debug the request? So we can always console.log this, right? Console.log. All right, let's just see if we can. Let's do object.keys. Just request. Yeah, that'll be good. And we'll do json.stringify. Right, so the problem is the request object has some functions in here that json.stringify was breaking on. So this should work now. Let's reload this page. Okay, cool. So we can see that we've got all this information that we have available to us in the request object. The one that I think is probably the most interesting, if we let's just do json.stringify, and we'll do request.params. Okay, this is the one we were talking about with Andrew. And if I reload this server, right, request.params right now is going to be empty. But if I start putting information in here, like hello equals world, right? What is it? Request.params. Must have the wrong object. Let's see. Express request params. Oh, it's under query. Yeah, that's it. Request.query. Let's look at this one. We'll reload our server. Come check this out. Right. So request.query is the information that comes out of here. So if Andrew's example, if he wanted to make a little ticker looker upper, right, he could say ticker equals AAPL. And now inside of his request, he has this object that he has available to himself where he can say, hey, in request.query, give me the value of ticker, right? So we could put request.query.ticker. And we restart our server, and we reload this, and it says it's the string value AAPL. Okay? There's another cool thing that we can do with the route, is that we can also put in, how do I describe this? It's like inside the route itself, right? So we could do, go ahead.
So the way you just did it, like when you just did ticker equals whatever, if you wanted to access that on the front end, is that a case where we would use like the window.hash URL and then set that equal to ticker?
Let's take a look at that. Good question, right? The short answer is no. So the stuff we were doing in client side before, right? If we pull this up, right, we have a window.location object, and a window.location has all that information here, right? Where would that be? Okay. So you'd have to process this. Yes, it's the search option, right? When you use a question mark, it assumes that it's just called the search object under window.location. The hash that we were looking at before, right, was an inside the page href, or inside the page anchor. So we could put in like ticker, right? Did I start my server? Stop pressing Control S. Wait. Let me get back to where we were. I got derailed for a second. Hold on. Right. Request query. I'm going to close this. Cool. So this is our query object. The problem is when you're talking about on the client side, Andrew, window.location is the information that it knows about the request in the first place, but this is client side. So everything that we do inside of the browser, we have to send it to a server. Okay? And this hashtag, for example, is not sent to the server. It is the search field is sent to the server. This is the same as if we had a form and we had its request method was get. All of those input fields would be sent along in a string that looks like this. I'm going to be like ticker equals Apple, and last price equals true, and name equals Eric, right? All of those are sent to the server, but this is not. This is just meant for inside the page linking. So how we would do this with XML HTTP request, which I think is maybe where you're getting at, is we would have to build an input on the page, and when you send your thing, you'd want to convert it to a query parameter like this, a search parameter, and then pass it to the server. So we'll keep looking at that. There's another cool thing that we get built in. If we wanted to write better, cleaner URLs that did not have this type of search parameter, right? So right now we're empty, but let's say we wanted to just make it so it was like /AAPL, okay? That doesn't exist right now. But we can add, through magic, a ticker object, right, by adding a colon to our route here, right? This is going to automatically put it into our params thing. Where does it put it in? What object does it put it into? Yeah. Oh, that's the one. That's okay. So we've got. So this is the query, right? This is the query string. But we also have request.params, which this is the one I was talking about a minute ago. So if I reload this server, right, the params is going to say ticker equals Apple because we put this here as a part of the request path. So we have a couple different ways we can structure our routes to give us the information we need and let us run queries, right? We could say app.getParams ticker. We could also write a second route that says app.get, just params, right? And so this would be the one that functions when there's nothing there. And we could do request, response, and we can say response.send json.stringify request.query, right? So this should, I've never written two like this before, so let's just say we didn't have this one, right? We'll put ticker equals APL, right? It's going to say the same thing. Tesla. What's really happening behind these two things is we said here's two routes. If I pass a slash and then I put colon ticker, then I'm creating a value in request.params that is has a key of ticker. This one, right, we can watch this happening, right? We'll say console.log/params route chosen. Oh, Control Z. And up here, we'll say params ticker route chosen, right? So there's two separate objects that have information we're passing to the server. One is through this magical :ticker value, and the other is through a query parameter, right? At request.query or request.params. I don't know why. So in window.location, right, we saw that this field is called search, but everywhere else it's called a query parameter. So when you're in other programming languages, they're going to call it query parameters too. I don't know why JavaScript calls this a search thing here. It should probably be .query, but this probably predates us writing good code on the internet. So this is probably from the early 90s when this was added. Okay. So I'm going to close this server and restart it. Okay, so we've got two separate routes taken. They have two different bits of code in here. One is returning the params object, and one is returning the query object. Okay, and so if we're running this, right, let's right, I'm going to reload this page. It's going to show, hey, we're on the params route, and if I go to the other one where I put / whatever, Tesla, right, it's the ticker route. So we're going to define as many routes as we want this way. But we also, right, so this is just two of the routes that we've defined. But we also have app.use and told it to look in the HTML folder, so we can also still come in here and say test.html. That's one of our files. So we can build routes any number of ways. Do you have any questions about routing? Because we're going to spend even more time on this. But before we move on, I want to make sure we understand this flow. This is just a shortcut. We could also have come in here and said app.get, HTML, test.html, function, request, response, and we could have used one of our file system commands to read the test.html file and send that back with response.send. This is just a built-in, right, express.static is a function that says, hey, when I use this, don't make me write all these file requests. Don't make me open up files and send them out. Just do it for me. Go ahead, Andrew.
So I think I'm kind of grasping it. Just one thing I'm not really understanding, or maybe you haven't got to it yet. So when you did like the response.send, then you did JSON stringify, the request.query. Mm-hmm. And so you're taking, you're basically retrieving what was put in the URL, the address bar, right?
Yep.
So from like a user standpoint, most people don't access new parts of websites that way. Like what if, like the example of using like a form, mm-hmm. Like if you wanted to do the same thing, but if someone was just saying, I want to type in Tesla and have the information pop up after they press a button rather than putting in the URL.
Yeah, great. Let's take a look at that, right? So we have index.html. Right now it just says the word index. Let's turn this into a real file. So we're going to, let's say, stock picker, right? And let's put a form in here. So we'll say h1, put in a ticker symbol. Right, we'll pretend this is a real website. So we'll say form, then the action equals, and we pick a URL here, right? Whatever URL we pick is going to be the route we need to make sure that exists. So we'd be like stock, right? And then method, right? Normally we would do post for this, but for the sake of making sure we understand this, I'm going to put get, and then we'll change it to post and show you how that changes things, right? And inside my form, I'm just going to have two things. I'm going to have input type equals text, name equals ticker, ID equals ticker. Right, I like to have both. Okay, and then we'll put input type equals submit, value equals get stock price. Okay, so index.html, we just go to there, right? Put in a stock ticker. This is all very familiar to us. If I put in this information now, like TSLA, and I click get stock price, right? The problem is it says cannot get /stock. We haven't written that route yet. So this is where we as backend programmers get to go in and do the fun stuff. So we will go in here and we'll say, we'll close the server, and let's write that now. So we'll come in here and say app.get, and we'll say stock function request response, and we'll do we'll just log it to the console so we know that we're doing the right thing. Console.log stock route, and we'll put in plus request.query.ticker. Okay. So the request object is going to have the information from the form. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to do the same thing we're doing here. Right? We'll say response.send json.stringify. So this route is not going to have a full HTML page behind it, but what we are going to have is we'll be able to see that we have this information, right? So put in a ticker symbol. We can put in AAPL. Click get stock. AAPL. Get stock price. And now that route responds with a thing. Okay? So we have to define a route for our form to use. Now, if you were going to use this in the way that you had been doing, right, where we're going to use XML HTTP request to actually handle the request so we don't have to reload the page, right, you might make your, let's do that. Let's go into index.html, and I'm not going to write a JavaScript file because that seems silly, but let's just say, right, we'll give our form an ID. That equals form. Ticker form, and we'll just really quickly write some JavaScript here. So we'll say script type equals text / JavaScript script, and I'm going to do document dot get element by ID ticker form dot on submit. Or let's just do add event listener. Let's do it this other way. We'll do submit. Right, the first thing I want to do is prevent this form from submitting. So I'm going to do event.prevent default, but I have to put event as my argument. Event. Then I'm going to say, var ticker equals document dot get element by ID ticker dot value. So I'm going to get the value out of that input. And then I'm going to say var xhr equals new XML HTTP request. Then I'm going to say xhr.onLoad equals function, and we'll just alert it console.log. Well, let's add it to the page. I'll put in a results div here. Div ID equals results div, and we'll say document.get element by ID results dot inner HTML equals, and we'll say JSON.parse this.response text. Okay, because it's going to come back to us as data. Okay, then I'm going to come in here and say xhr.open get, and we'll call it slash stock ticker equals plus ticker, right? Because we got the value of the ticker input, and then we do xhr.send. Okay, so this line's of code, like we're still doing an exit. Like this should be pretty familiar. We did this quite a bit last week. We're getting the value of the thing. We're preventing the form from submitting, and then we're going to grab that information, and when it comes back to us, we're going to put it in this response div. So over here, right, where we have the actual stock thing, we're using response.send, and we're turning this into JSON stringify. So we're going to respond back with JSON as a string, copy it with JSON parse. So we probably don't even, let's not JSON parse this. We don't want to turn it into an object, or it would say object, right? And so if we run this program, reload our page, and we'll put in Tesla, you can see that it pops in right here. We could say APL is going to do it. Pop in right there. We can say, what's another one? NTFX? Is that Netflix? I don't know. GME, GameStop. Cool. But behind the scenes, XML HTTP request is actually sending the request. It's hard to see. It's sending the request to that thing, and when the response comes back, our code is putting it on the page. Now, we have been using, right? This is a get, right? If I change this to post, which is most of the time how you're going to be sending information from forms. If I do this right now, we should get an error. Let's make sure that we can see everything. And I'll just say GME, right? All right, let's change this to AAPL. That didn't work. Oh, because I have to reload the page, right? So now if I put GME here, right, we should see, okay, there's a 404 now. Cannot post stock because we have this route set as a get. If we change this to post and we restart our server, now it works. Okay? So this method, when we're using on Express, where we're defining a route, we've been using app.get. We also have app.post. We also have app.put and app.delete. Those are the methods that are really like the main verbs of HTTP. That's the Hypertext Transport Protocol. Browsers are communicating with servers using HTTP. And so, if we wanted to do both of these, right, the way to do this in Express, right, if we wanted to take gets or post, we would just do the same thing twice, right? Get. Right? We don't care if you post or get. We just want to return the information. And so this, to me, is really where the power of JavaScript comes into play, right? We have this function that is doing the same thing in both places. So you could just say like handle stock pick, and we'll just create that as a function. Var, let handle stock pick equals function. Let's paste it. Okay. And then this one will be handle stock pick. Okay. So very cleanly, we have both of our routes defined, and we have it so that the function here is actually handling this information. So if we run this now, right? Bloop. Right? I could put in, let's say, GameStop. We can see that this was this is a post, right? Let's yep. So this one, this post happened. But if we change our index.html, let's change this back to get, right? We reload this page and we say Tesla, right? Now it's a get. And we're actually getting a 304 not modified because the browser is smart enough to know that like last time I requested this, I got the same value. If I change this to like something, it doesn't, we're not actually looking up stocks right here, so we can put whatever we want, right? Now we get a 200. Okay, we can also force this, right? So if we put in Tesla again, Tesla, okay, get a 304 again, right? Every time we click this is a 304. It's letting the browser know nothing has changed since the last time you made this request. We can, in here, because we have a response object, we can do response dot, what is it, status, no. What is the node send response code? Status code. Yeah, status. It's just the status function. Right? So we can say response.status 200. Okay? And so now, if I restart this server, right, we've been seeing that we're getting this error, this status of 304. We can force the status to be whatever we want it to be. If I restart the server. I guess it's not letting us. Why would it not? 404. Should be able to pick whatever status we want here. Interesting. Maybe there's a bug here. That's low. Right, yeah. So 404 works. Forcing it to be 200. I guess not modified is overriding our desire to have it do something. That's interesting. I've never seen that before. Let's just let's look at this value here. Status. This might have some warning in here telling us why it was doing that. Interesting. I don't know. Okay, let's try this. Send status. Let's see if we can force it to always send to 200. Let's close this out and go back to our page and put in Tesla 200. Yeah, it's still overriding our desire and sending a 304. Interesting. And we're getting some kind of error here. Cannot send headers after they are sent to the client. That's weird. Let's just do this. Let's try response status dot 200 dot, and let's see if this will work. Tesla. Yeah. After that first request, it's always doing a 200. I've never seen that, but we can change that to be whatever we wanted, right? We could make this 500. Right, this is a server error. We pick Tesla. See, 500 is in here, even though it's still returning the content. So we can kind of control some of this, but I guess 200 and 304, the browser is smart. The server is smart enough to know like the content hasn't changed. We're good. Okay, so that's kind of like the basics of routing, right? We've seen that we can tell Express to look for an HTML file or a JavaScript file or a CSS file or an image and send that along if it finds it. We can put in whatever folder name we want here and it will look through there. We could also probably do like two folders, right? I can do app.use express.static. We'll just put in like public HTML. Okay, let's make a new folder. Public HTML. And let's put in something in here. New file, neat.html. We'll just put in like neat. Let's see if this works. So we have an HTML folder that has index and test, and we have a public HTML that has neat. We're going to do app.use twice and see if this will look in both places. All right, so let's go neat.html. Yeah, it loads neat. But we also see that we can, still pull in test. Let's see who takes priority, right? So we got neat.html here. Let's copy this. Neat from public HTML. Copy. And let's make that same file name, neat.html, and put it in here. From HTML, right? So one of these is from that other folder and one of them is from the other. So let's close this out, start it, and let's go back to neat. Okay, so it's pulling it from HTML first. I guess it's because it's wherever it searches. We defined this one first, and so it's pulling that one in because it found that file, right? So as soon as there is some criteria in the request that is met in order of when it finds it, it sends it out. Let's try this. Before we do app.use, let's do app.get neat.html. And we'll say function rec res. We'll say res.send haha or neat.html from manual route. Okay. Let's reload our server. So yeah, it goes in order of when it first finds it. As soon as the criteria is met, then it's going to stop looking for other files. So that's something to be aware of. Okay. But you can have multiple folders if you wanted for whatever reason, right? You might want to make an HTML folder and a JavaScript folder and a CSS folder and still have them be used like this. That's one way to do it. Or you can put everything under a single folder and then you can have a /js/ whatever. It's however you want to do it. Okay, these are called routes. Does everyone kind of understand that? What is a route? Someone teach me what a route is. Leah.
Um. mm, I thought I understood it, but now I'm blinking.
Andrew, what is a route in your words?
It's the designated file path that we use as a URL.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, to me, like the word when you think of route, it means really just anything after the server, right? The server is localhost 3030. That's the server. That's Express in this case. The route is what I'm asking for. So it could be, 15, it could be /JS, right? So let's put JS, whatever, right? Neat.html. It's gonna it's this. This is the route. And so what we're doing in Express and when we write servers in general is we're saying when you have this route, run this code, right? With the exception being if it's an actual file. This is a static file route. So if a file exists, just serve the file. But really what our job is as backend developers is to make routes that do something. And we're going to do, and the do something is run some code that is a function, right? We're going to write functions. So this would be called like the route handler. When you hear route handler, that's the code that happens when the route happens. Any questions with that? Like these are important terminologies that are shared across languages and shared across environments. Andrew?
Maybe maybe I'm skipping ahead, but just I've seen 3 different ways now. So in the where is it? In the response part. So I've seen response.json, I've seen response.send, and you've done JSON stringify, and then from the XML we do JSON parse.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? Like what if we did, like with mine, I JSON parsed it. What if I did response.json with the same data?
Okay.
What's the difference going to be?
Let's take a look at all those things because there's a lot of complexity here, right? So response.send by default is sending back to the server or sending back to the browser a string. So if we take, right, that's params, right? If I put in request.query, so response.send request.query, right? And let's restart our server and go to params. Params, we put in a query, ticker equals apple, okay? It's sending back the text, ticker apple, okay? But if we actually look at the response return itself, and we go into the headers, where would it be? Response headers, right? It's saying that the content type of this response is text HTML. Now that's not a big deal because we know this is a string. But if we change this to response.json, and let's restart this, and we reload this page, it's supposed to set the content type. Let's try reloading again. Oh, yeah, so I had to reload the page. When you reload the page, it's sending a content type of application JSON. So the reason why you'd want to use JSON is because if you're building an API for other people to consume, right, you're going to build an Express server and you're going to say, this is my weather app, you can query it with a zip code and it's going to return back JSON. This is the correct content type to serve back when you're sending out JSON content. Now, we can capture, right, because we are on our end doing response text, because that's our only client-side way to access the return from XML HTTP request. But response text is taking the text, regardless of if it's content type application, JSON, or text/HTML, and we're going to parse it into an object. This is still a string. We just told the client, whoever's requesting this, that we're sending JSON. There are a lot of APIs that if you send JSON back as text HTML, it's going to assume that you want to do something with HTML, and it's not going to work. So the content type of the return is the only difference between response.json and response.send. There's also a couple other things in here. We haven't even touched this yet. There's response.send send file, right? That's going to send binary information back, right? So let's see what this will probably break, but let's just do right. And let's take a look at the response type. Reload it. And let's reload. Okay, yeah. Oh, path must be a string to send file, right? So this is what this static information is doing here, right? When we're saying it's like we could do HTML, index.html, right? So send file is going to send that file out. And if we start this over, and we come here, path must be absolute. Okay. Let's restart again and see if this works. It's got to be fully absolute. So we'd have to put C:/users d CBC 12. Yeah. What is the name of this? Express app. So this is actually going to read that file from my computer and send it out, which is exactly what this is doing. Okay. So I load this now, right? Path must be specified. That's annoying. So we got to jump through a few hoops to get this to work. But send file will read a file and shove it out as standard text. Okay. So that's another one of the things that is in here. There's a few other response types. I don't use them very often. Really, it's, almost always you're going to just use response.send if you're sending text, and response.json if you intend to send JSON. They're doing the exact same thing. You're still sending text out, but all that's changing is your content type. Any question there? What you have to do on the client side when you're grabbing that with XML HTTP request is completely separate from what you're doing here. You're doing JSON parse to turn it into a JavaScript object that the browser can use. You really have to, in your head, I know we're writing this code, and I said this to Leah earlier today, we're writing both sides of this, both the front end and the back end, but most of the time, unless you're building something for yourself, like as a project, you're going to be writing the front end or the back end, but very rarely both. Or when you are writing both, you're not going to be doing it at the same time. Like the browser is your users. The stuff that you're doing, the JavaScript that's in your web page is for your users to see. And so we're doing things in the JavaScript there that is functionally similar, but you're consuming the content that's coming from the server. The server is going to be hosted somewhere else on the internet. It's going to be in Amazon Web Services or Heroku or Google Cloud. That's not going to be your infrastructure. You're just going to say, here's the server source code, and you're going to say, here are my routes. Here's what we were going to actually serve out to the people that are requesting my page. And then you're going to spend a bunch of time building the page so that all your buttons, in your example, Andrew, where you're building a stock looker-upper, right? You're going to build the HTML, and you're going to say, when someone puts in a ticker symbol, go to my server, and then do something with the response. Everybody understand that? All right, it is 6:03. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to show another way to do routes that is even cooler. So let's come back at 6:20. All right, everyone can see, I hope. Yep, cool. So we've been kind of writing express routes in one of two ways so far. The first is, hey, if there's a static file here, send that out. If there's a route that we've defined it inside of our code, let's pull this. Let's serve that content here. But there's a third way, and you'll probably see this pretty frequently when you start building more complex projects where you want to really have a clear delineation of functionality. A great example comes to mind. Leah's building that card game system. Maybe she has separate routes for, if she builds poker, blackjack, solitaire. We want to separate these cleanly and neatly so that we can keep like all the content and all the code related to those endpoints separate. And so what we can do is we can come in here and say const routes equals, we'll just say require routes, /routes.js. And the / is just saying, hey, look for a file in the current directory. And so then we can come in here and make a file called routes.js. And in here, we're going to create a router. Okay, and a router is just all this stuff that we've been doing here by default, where we're saying app.get, app.post. All of that is possible with this is the built-in Express router. But what we'll often do is we'll put all of our routes in separate files like this. So let's save this, and let's just really quickly create like a real router. So we'll say const express equals require express, and then we'll say const router equals express.router. Okay, that's how easy it is to get up and running. But now we're going to say router.get, and we'll give it a path of like something magical. And it's the same sort of syntax, right? It's a function that has a request object and a response object. And we'll just res.send, you went to something magical. Okay? And then to make this available, because we used require, what do we need to do to put the content of this node script that we've called with the require function? Who knows? When we've been creating other node modules, node packages, there's a special line of code that we need to include at the end to tell it what to send out. Go ahead, Andrew.
Export.
Yeah. Module.exports, and we can just put in router. Okay? So now what we've done is we've said, hey, we've defined all of our routes in this file, and it's going to send the router back to us, and then we're going to simply say app.use routes. App.use is a really this is an extremely powerful function because it lets us define a whole slew of routes. This is like turning on, it's called middleware, right? So it's in between the server and the browser, right? So this is where we would put code for that. And app.use, we're already using this with express.static. That is an example of middleware that is saying, load this file from this folder. And now we've created our own separate module or package that is exporting the express router middleware. So all the stuff we've been doing, app.post, app.get, we're now putting into an object and then telling Express to use it. Okay? And so if we reload our server, what do we call it? Something magical. And I can do something magical. And we'll see you went to something magical. So oftentimes you won't see, especially with Express, you'll often see your index.js is really just creating the Express server. And then most of your routes will be defined this way. You'll have a separate file that says routes. This is a really cool way to keep your app very clean, right? So you'll often see stuff like that. I'm going to take all this out, right? This will be what your Express app looks like, and all of your routes will be defined under here. Okay. Another cool thing you can do with this, right, is we've got routes.js. I can make another file, and we'll call this card routes.js, and we'll do the exact same thing. Const express equals require express. Const router equals express.router, and then we'll say router.get draw, /draw, and then we'll say function res, we'll say res.send you drew a card. Okay, and then we do the exact same thing, module.exports, and we say router. Okay, Right? So we've got, this was our main routes file that has some of the other stuff in it, but you'll often see several of these linked together. And we can, and sometimes how it'll be set up is like by the branch of functionality that we're trying to build. So if we did const card routes equals require card routes.js, and then we have to put this in app.use, right? Card routes. Card counts, that's not a thing, routes. We restart our server, index.js, and what do we call the card routes? Draw, right? So something magical is being pulled from that first router, and then draw is pulled from the second, right? You drew a card. So that's another way we can set up routers. But the cool thing is, often when you're seeing this as a program, right? You're trying to build an actual functional website, like you want the router to start firing on a sub page, right? So, maybe this is blackjack is the first argument, and then the router itself is the second one, right? So you can see when you call this version of use, it's saying under blackjack, do these handlers. And so if we restart our server now, draw is going to give us a 404, but if I do blackjack / draw, we get that route. So you'll often, when we're structuring our websites and our programs, you'll often have your Express app itself is very small. It'll be, just a handful of lines of code like this. And you'll have the information about the routes set up like this. So it'll be like const user routes equals require user routes.js, and then it would say, app.use user routes. So you'd have like any sub URL, like if it's user login, user profile, user logout, that would be where we would put all of those different individual routes, so they get to live in their own file. Now, the other thing that jumps to mind seeing this is, we care very much about the cleanliness and structure of our project. So when we start going down this path, where we're making a whole bunch of different individual routers to handle input from our server, we'll generally come in here and create a routes folder, and we'll put all of these files in that. Cool. So Visual Studio Code knows that we've imported this thing, and it's given us the option to update the import, right? So let's click yes, and you'll see what happens, right? It changed it to /routes, card routes. Okay, but I was going to do that next anyway. Yep, and it's going to do the same thing again. And you can see that when we click yes, it changed it to routes. So oftentimes, when you're looking at an Express project that is structured in this kind of way, which is going to be almost all of them with any complexity, you're going to have individual routers like this that will be set up to kind of show you the structure and overall flow of the website, right? You'd start with, here's my user information. You might have a routes for page navigation. Anything that is like a slash on this URL, right? Like blackjack, we might have a poker in here, right? We might have a solitaire. Like all of those different bits of functionality will probably have their own router, and will probably be either stored in a folder or stored somewhere else, right? Any questions with this? Like the routers are extremely powerful because they let us keep our JavaScript source code as small and tight as possible, so that you don't have to read 700 lines of code. You can just break things up by what they're talking about. Go ahead, Selena.
What it looks like is that this is like the table of contents, and then the rest of it is like the chapters.
Yep, exactly right. That's a really good way to think of it.
Okay.
Yep. We're defining, like these are the actual things that is handling the request. Like these are the actual books in your or the chapters in your example. And this is like the table of contents saying, hey, when I'm doing blackjack, look in chapter 4. That's where the content is. And so we will often structure our Express app this way. All of the stuff we've been doing to date, where we're writing it just in our main Express, where we're saying like app.get, whatever, and then putting, like, it's the same functionality. It's just, if we were building a complex app, we don't want our main Express app to be 600 lines long. it makes the project very cluttered, and it also makes it really difficult to like find the spot you're trying to get to. Like, you know, if we made a user routes, for example, we know all of our user functionality would be in there. Right? Like user routes.js. And we would
On line 10, should it say app.user or app.use?
Yep, app.use. Thank you. Const express equals require express. Const router equals express.router. Right? Our user router would generally have things like router.get profile. Right? That's the user profile. It would do something. Right? Rec res. We'd also probably have router.get log out. We'd probably also need a login, right, where we're going to check the username and password. But this lets us separate our functionality by URL so that we're ready to go, right? And then in Andrew's example that he was looking at earlier today, he's got a page. It loads and it has like a stock information. He might say, hey, anything that's at like a main route, one of these main routers, is going to return HTML. But then I'm going to make a const API routes that I'm going to, whenever I make an XML HTTP request, these are all going to return JSON. And so then he would say, you know, require routes, API routes.js, just to have that structured that way so that when he says, fetch me the latest Apple price, that's going to return a JSON object to us. And we know that like all of that is available in this one file. So as we want to add API endpoints to our project, we open one file and we can start adding them in there. Any questions? Require is an extremely powerful node function because as long as you have module.exports, that's going to be returned back to here. Go ahead, Leah.
Is there a way to do all of this without like putting stuff in the URL bar, or is that the only way?
What do you mean by that?
Like like if you want to do like just if you want to use something in Node, like if you or like you want to do any code, I'm struggling to explain. If like just what we've been doing in general, like is there a way to do like a function or something without having to use the URL?
No.
Okay.
Short answer is no. So, are you saying like, I don't, maybe describe it a little bit better. Like, everything in the context of web requires a URL. A URL says, give me the resource at this location, and it includes a server and a path or a file. It always requires us to like request a resource from the server. So, you know, we've been playing with live server that is built into our thing. It's doing this same content, which is like, it knows there's index.html. When I use the live server, it's sending us index.html and it creates a port 5501 or whatever.
So can you like not get anything from the server without putting it in the URL?
Correct. Yeah, the only exception is when we put nothing in here, right? That is going to by default load some default route. If it's a it's going to either load index.html or it's going to load, if we created a app.get / right, that's the same thing. And here, let's do this rec res console.log. Let's do res.send default route / called. Okay. And let's take out our index.html. Let's rename this. Not index.html. Cool. That should work. unexpected token on line 17. Oh, let's take this up too. We broke our code when we were doing examples. Right. Rerun our server. Module not found. User routes. Didn't finish this one either. Alright. Now we should be ready. API routes as well. Okay, good. Perfect. Oh, no. User routes is not defined. What? User routes. Oh. Let's just fix this. User. This is the routes. Okay. Now it should work. Stupid errors. This is what you get for trying to go too fast. Yeah. Bit aware of it. Oh, okay. So we did not module.exports router. Okay. Now we should be good. Good. Okay. So if we load this page now, we're getting that primary route handler. app.get/. If we type in index.html here, it's going to give us an error. Now, by default, we've been loading index.html because we've been loading /. The browser is, most servers are smart enough to know that if we don't put anything over here, and there's a file called index.html, serve that. Okay, so when we have, rename index.html, right? If we did not have this / default route being sent, when we send nothing, it's smart enough to know that we really mean index.html. Okay? So if you wanted to have everything be happening without having to send URLs across, then you would have to have not an index.html, but like a main app.get that did a bunch of stuff. And you'd probably want to use query parameters, things like that. But everything in HTML and everything in web development lives and breathes with routes, with a path. We're going to request a resource, a server's going to do something, and send it back. That is everything. What you might often do, and this is a concept that's pretty popular, called single-page applications, where all we do is load index.html, and we've kind of done this a few times over the course of the last couple of weeks, and then we say, index.html is our only page we send, and then everything that happens from then on out is with an API call. So we're going to go query, get some JSON, and update contents of the page. That's a single-page application. Most websites are built as multi-page applications, where it's more like a traditional HTML page where you're going to click on the About link, and it's going to go to about.html. You're going to click on Logout or User Profile, and it's going to go to a profile page. But one of the big problems and one of the big challenges in teaching web development as a whole, and even in the context of a coding bootcamp like this, is that there's no right or wrong way to do things. There's a million ways to do things. And so we want to just expose you to one way to do them and show you where those diverge from time to time. Go ahead, Andrew.
So I know that single page apps are pretty popular right now. If, let's say, you did have, a single page application and you can use the menu to click buttons to navigate to certain parts of it, would you want to navigate and be directed to certain parts of the single page with the routes, or would you just want to use it through just like anchor tags? Or would there be any reason to use routes with the certain parts of the single page?
Again, that comes up entirely up to your choice. There are lots of single page apps that will write and they'll build it as if it was not a single page app. You'll use anchor tags and links so that you go to like /about and it will load the about content. We would then use JavaScript on the client side to say when the link is clicked, prevent the default behavior, go and get the information and update the page. We can do a bunch of complicated stuff like that. The reason why you would want to not do that is that the browser already knows how to navigate to pages. And so we make our products more accessible if we don't try to steal user behavior with JavaScript. Like, we have this, right? We say AAPL, right? And we wrote JavaScript to like make the request, and it was seeing cannot get stuck. But if I had JavaScript turned off on this page, AAPL, and I click this, it's going to do the default form post and take me to that other page. Right? So it's almost always better to assume that you're working in the default environment. And if you wanted to do something really complicated with a single page app, there are very good reasons to build single page apps. But those reasons are like, you really want to save bandwidth, right? So that you know you're going to be working on an intensive application, and every time you load a page, right, this page might be a megabyte large, and maybe it's a mobile app where mobile data is important. And so rather than every time you go to a new page, you just need to go and get the stuff that has changed so that mobile browsers don't have to use as much data. But you're going to build that in a very specific way for your specific use case when that comes up. That's the main reason single page apps have gotten so popular lately, is to support mobile users without having to send a lot of data. Right? Like, if you send a single page app and it's got a bunch of images and logos and headers, navigation elements, but all that ever changes is the stuff in the middle. Like, it does not make sense to send all the headers and logos and images every time somebody starts a new, navigates to a new page if they're on mobile. You don't have to send all that stuff along. Does that make sense? Cool. JavaScript turned back on. Good. All right. So we've built. So those are really the main ways you're going to use routers. Okay. Oftentimes, when I'm building an Express app, I'm going to start by doing exactly what we've been doing up until now. I'll start defining a few routes, app.get, app.post, and I'll put in the actual routes themselves. And as I start to add complexity and functionality, that's my, once this starts getting to like 50, 100 lines long, I'll start pulling that out and putting them into routers, like when I've got a structure in mind. All right, how about this? We let this digest for a few minutes. My Taco Bell just showed up. We'll take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to build the paper, rock, scissors game from a brand new Express project, and we'll use a couple different ways to use routes to like make it actually a thing with clickable buttons, and we can win and lose. That sound good? Okay, it's 6:44. Let's come back at 6:55. Everyone can see? All right, so we're going to build a paper, rock, scissors game. We've done this a few different times now, but we're going to build this entirely from scratch and entirely in Express, so that we have our own package server, standalone, that we can do things correctly. So I'm gonna do this, the whole shebang. We're gonna create this as a repository. We're gonna have this as a reference to look at throughout the course, and eventually, when we start learning about server deployments, we should be able to just deploy this server and have it be running so we can play paper, rock, scissors from anywhere in the world. Okay? So let's go to GitHub. Let's create a new repository. We'll call this paper, rock, scissors server. Okay? Paper, rock, scissors as a simple Express app. We're going to add a gitignore. We're going to say node. We'll add a readme, and we're good to go. Okay, I'm going to copy this information here. I'm going to pull up git bash and go git clone, and I'm going to press shift insert here to paste my thing. And I've got paper, rock, scissors server as a git repository here as a folder. I'm going to navigate into it, and what do we type in to turn this into a node project?
npm init.
npm init, exactly right. So it will be called paper, rock, scissors server. Yes. Version 1. Description: paper, rock, scissors, Express server. Cool. index.js, no test command. It's got our GitHub repository in here. We're all good. Author Eric Harrison. Yes, all is well. Now I know I'm going to want Express, right? Might as well install it while I'm here. And we're good to go, right? That's like all we really need to get started. So, all right, let's open a new folder. And it was called Paper Rock Scissors Server. Great. Don't save. We don't need that anymore. Oh, excuse me. All right, I'm gonna make this bigger because we're gonna spend most of our time here in the terminal, or in the text editor. Get bash and delete that. Cool. So I need an index.js, right? That's our entry point. So I'll say index.js. Okay. I know I'm gonna want an HTML folder, just so I can store all my actual HTML content. And I know I'm also going to probably want, let's make a routes folder, right? So in index, we'll just start at the beginning. We know we need const express equals require express. Okay. Just to make sure we're on the right spot, let's just do, we need our app, right? So we'll say const app equals express. And then just to make sure that we're up and running, we'll say app.get / function rec res. And just to test to make sure we're working correctly, we'll just say res.send paper rock scissors. Okay. And then we need to listen on a port, so we'll say app.listen, and we'll say port 80 for this one because I don't want to fiddle with a bunch of weird port numbers. So if we pull up our browser now, which is here, we just go to localhost just to make sure, localhost, right? It's not going to be running right now because we don't have the app running, but if we come in here and we say node index.js, okay, now our server is up and running, and if we go here, right, you see PRS has loaded, our little message is working, so we're right where we need to be. Any questions about this before we start actually building this as paper rock scissors? Okay. Cool. So, right, we're here. I want to probably have HTML being served as files, right? We want to design our pages so it's got a couple buttons on it, and maybe we have some information here that says, maybe like, have we won, have we lost? Maybe we want to have a list of results that constantly updates so we can see what our past 5 games have looked like. So we'll use app.use, and we'll say express.static, and we call our folder HTML. Okay? So nothing really has changed here except that we've now said, hey, if there's a file that exists, let's serve that first. So we're going to do index.html, and in here we're going to do exactly what we've been doing this whole time. We're just going to create a little template for ourselves. I like this to be indented like this, so I'm going to indent everything, and I'm going to say paper, rock, scissors, the game. Right? I know I'm going to want a CSS file, right? So I'm going to do link href equals CSS, and then paper rock scissors.css. We need to put in rel equals style sheet. Okay. I'm also going to want some JavaScript because I want this to be API driven. And I want to click a button and have stuff update on the page. We're going to build this kind of like a single page application. I don't want to reload the page every time. We're going to have this be single page. So I'm going to do script type equals text/JavaScript. And I'm going to say source equals JS prs.js. Okay. So now inside my HTML folder, this is like our document root. Okay, this is where all of the static files are being served from. I need to make those subfolders, right? So I'll do CSS, and I will come up here and do new folder JS. Okay, and in here I know I need a prs.js, and then CSS I need a prs.css. Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
I just realized something that I did on my project earlier that I maybe didn't need to. I've linked the index.js file to the HTML file.
Yeah, you do not.
That's not necessary
Express
because I'm calling it with the XML.
is sending this content out.
Okay.
Your website does not know that index.js exists, and if we put that in there, it would give us a 404. It only knows the files that exist under this HTML folder. Okay. Cool. So we're here. We've got our HTML, we've got some JavaScript files, we've got a CSS file, so we can start building web development. Let's check in this code so we keep a record of where we're at. Initial entry of HTML page and simple express server. Okay. I'm going to stage my commits and push them to GitHub. Push. Okay. So we're all caught up. Let's just start prototyping, right? I want a H1 that says like paper, rock, scissors. Okay. And then I'm going to have, let's say, div ID equals game buttons. Okay. And I'll put in button ID equals paper. And we'll say paper. And we'll just copy this. And we'll change this to rock, scissors, let's say rock. Right. So if we load this page now, if we load node index.js, and we go check out our page, right? This is exactly what we expect. It's unstyled. We've been here before. We know we can style things later. It's not a big deal. But right now we want to really just focus on functionality. So, what else do we need? We need a place to display, the game results. So maybe we'll make a div that says game results. So let's do that next. We'll say div ID equals game results. Div. And then we probably want a div that's like, the past games. Right? Div. And because we're doing web development, like we don't know necessarily like what's important to show or what's not important to show, but I would like to think that like it will probably be like an unordered list, and we'll say like U1. I don't maybe say something like paper beats rock. Right? So if we're on the page, right, it'll be like this. So let's do a little bit of styling now, so that we kind of keep our little divs and stuff separate. So what is our main div? We've got game buttons, game results, and past games. Game buttons, game results, past games. Right? We're in CSS now, so I'm just going to do some lightweight styling. I'm going to put a border around each of these. Border 1px solid 000. Right? You can just even copy this so that we're all the same everywhere. Okay. And maybe we want to make this flex box as well. So let's put a div ID equals container, right, and put everything inside of it so that we can get some nice looking boxes on our own. Right, so /div, and then we'll come in here and we'll say container is display flex, and maybe we'll right. So that'll turn that on. Now, I am not a designer, right? So maybe my next place to go is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to inspect this element. Right? We know it's display flex. We've got our element here. Here. Let's put something in here so we can see it. Right? Like you picked. Maybe we'll do H2. You win. H2. You picked paper. Computer picked rock. So right now this is all static. We're just styling this out to see how we want it to look. We turn this into a flex box. Let's reload the page, and we can see we've got 3 separate things. Let's use the little built-in flex editor here that Chrome gives us, and let's see what CSS we need to add. We probably want to have okay, that's pretty good. All right. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Alright, so I really just need to add justify content space evenly. And then we probably want to give each of these a width, right? So we'll say something like width, and we'll say 25%. So that it's going to just consume up a quarter of the page and will take up more space, right? So that looks pretty good. We're off to a good start. Okay, like we're going to do more styling here, obviously, but we really want to just build the game. And so a lot of that can happen a little bit later, right? So game buttons, these probably need to be flexed as well. Maybe we'll come in here and say display flex, and then we might want to even do the same thing, justify content space evenly. We might want to do align items center, right? So if we reload, now we got our buttons in the middle of the page, right, in the middle of this element, because we made 2 flex boxes now. Cool. All right, so we want to click it. So I click paper, it sends it to the server. The server decides if we've won or lost, and then sends something back to us, and then we'll update the information in here. So right now, we probably we want it to be like you win, you lose, you tie. So let's maybe say ID equals game status, and then ID equals game content. I don't know. And then we'll maybe want to come in here and say ID equals game list, right? Or game history list. So now we're off to a pretty good start. We got IDs on all the elements we know we want to update, and now it's really just up to us to like build into Express so we can handle those requests. So let's go back to Express now. All right, we're serving the HTML file, but we want to build some routes. So we want to have it so that like JavaScript itself can make a request to us, and when we get that request, whether we send paper or rock or scissors, then it runs the game, sends back whether we won or lost, and then our JavaScript on the client side can update the page. So let's maybe do that as some comments. We'll say event listener on the buttons to let us know what the player picked. Send player choice to server. Update page elements with game results. Okay, so let's just start. We're inside our client-side JavaScript right now. Let's add our event listener, but we didn't put defer in here, so this is being loaded before our page is loaded. So we're gonna start everything off with a document.add event listener DOM content loaded. Okay. So we're going to first have the page load, and then we're going to create some event listeners. We created a parent called game buttons that is going to let us know which one we've clicked. So we're going to say document.get element by ID game buttons add event listener click, and that will return an event. And how do we know which element we've actually clicked on inside a click handler?
Event.target.
Yep, exactly right. So let's just make sure we're on the right spot. Let's do event.target. Right. If I reload this page, I click scissors, right? Rock, paper. But we also have to trap when we click something that's not that, because we're on game buttons. So what was it? .node name. Let's console.log object.keys event.target. Right? I want to see. Right? I always. What's that? What is the every single time? Let's look this up in Google because we don't have to remember everything, do we?
I think it was node name that we did last time, because we did an if statement to equal button.
Yeah, okay, so that's right. It just wasn't popping up in our. All right, cool. So we were right. So let's just do event.target.node name just to make sure we're on the right path. That's right. Button, 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 if. All right, cool. So if event.target.node name equals button, right? It's going to be uppercase button. All right. In here, we're going to say get the ID of the button that was picked. Make a request to our server. So when we click a button, we're going to get that information. So let's just do that here. Right? We'll say let player choice equal event.target.id .id. Thank you. Right, and we can just make sure we console.log player choice. We can reload the page. Paper, rock, scissors. Right, this is all, we've done this before. All right, now we need to make a request to your server. So we're going to use XML-HTTP request. Right, so we'll say let xhr equals new XML-HTTP request. Then we're going to say xhr.onload equals function. All right, and here's where we have to do the crazy stuff, right? So we're sending the player choice to the server. Right, this was our original comment. And then we need to, when the choice come back, right, update the page elements with game results. Okay? So we're going to do xhr.open, and we'll do get for now. And we will say, maybe we, now is where we have to decide what are our paths, what are our endpoints going to be for this. And I think it probably needs to be something like, let's just do, hey, game paper, right, or game whatever, right. So we can make this, and we'll just come in here and say we're going to send our player choice along, player choice, okay, and then xhr.send. So that's as easy as that comes, right? We send a request. We still need to figure out if we want or not, and then update the page. Okay, but that's maybe that's like a good enough start, right? So we created an endpoint. We said, hey, we're gonna have a /game, and whenever we get something from /game, it's gonna either be paper, rock, or scissors. So we're at a good stage where now it's time to actually go and make that game actually work. So let's update our GitHub. We made some changes here. We want to save this in so that the commit lets us know kind of what step we're at in the development process. So we'll say first draft of client-side interface. Click yes to stage our changes. We'll push. All right, but we're at a stage now where, and we can verify this here as soon as it's done doing its thing. We reload our page, and we look at the network, right, clear. It's making a request to paper, rock, or scissors. And you can see that the path to that is /game/scissors /game/rock. Okay. So let's build a route. Let's build the actual game. All right, cool. So we got our HTML there. Let's close this folder up. We know we're gonna make, maybe we'll just call it game, right? Game.js. Okay, and it's in our routes folder. We'll come in here and we'll say const game routes equals require routes /game.js. Okay, and then we'll also say app.use /game routes. Okay, so we've kind of if we pick good names here, this is kind of self-documented. Right, it's telling us what it's doing. We can follow the flow of the logic here. We know that we've got a /game, and those routes are defined in this file, which we can then pull up. Right. So how do we develop a router? Who wants to walk me through this? We briefly looked at it a little while ago. Does anyone feel confident in their ability to talk me through typing? I see no one is jumping to volunteer. All right. Well, since this is our second time ever using this mechanism, I'll do it, and I'll explain what we're doing as we go on. All right. So we need to call in the express object. So we'll say require express. The reason we need to call in the express object, right? This is a separate package. Whenever we call a require, it's loading a separate package. So express does not exist inside game.js until we require it. The next thing we want to do is we want to make a router, right? And we do that by saying express.router with a capital R, and it's a function. So it's going to return an object that knows how to handle routes. Okay, so we know we have 3 of them, right? We've got a paper, a rock, and a scissors, right? Each of these routes will need to, right? Because we have a route that is paper, we know what the player choice is already. The player has chosen paper, but we need to know the computer choice. So we probably need to have something that gets a computer choice. And then that should be it, right? So let's make the computer choice first, right? So we have our const options equals, let's make this an array, and we'll say paper, rock, scissors. Okay, and then we can say in each of, right, so what I've seen some of you start doing is you know how to write JavaScript already, so we know we can get const, let's just say like let computer choice equals, we can do math.floor, math.random times 3, right? And we can say options, right? So this is going to give us some random array, some random value in this, and we might even want to make this, we want to make this options.length, so that it will always, if we continued to add paper, rock, scissors options in here, like we wouldn't have to go change this line of code, so that might be a good way to go. But the problem is, this is express, and it's asynchronous, so we're only getting the, code is only executing when we send a request to the server. And this kind of touches on what Leo was asking about earlier, which is we almost always have to have a URL here, because that's what the context of what we're building here is. So if I was to come in here and say, router.get, paper, function, rec, res, and then I say, return, computer choice, for example. Okay? Or let's not just return, but res.send. Let's do res.json. We know we're going to work. This is going to be an API for us, right? So if I was to run node index.js right now, what did I do? Oh, need to module.exports equals router. Okay, good. So I'm running my server. If I go to localhost/paper, right? Oh, game paper. Oops. Game paper. Right? It returns the string rock. Okay, this was the computer choice. If I reload this over and over and over again, it's always going to return rock because the server is running here. We want to always get the value inside the place that we're making our option, right? Like these are never going to change. Paper, rock, and scissors, that can be inside the server, but the choice has to be picked every single time we go to this endpoint, right? So we'll do. Oop. Wait, what? Oh, I don't want to search. Oh, I have to restart the server. We made a change. Right? And now we're getting different values each and every time, whereas before we were not. And this kind of touches on like what Andrew was talking about, where he had the right code. He was pulling Yahoo Finance, but he was doing it in the server, so it was only happening when the server was doing it. We want to get that information when the user, the client, the browser requests that resource. Okay, so this is good, right? So A, we got paper. We need to do the same thing for rock, right? We need to know A, if we won or lost, and B, like we just have to send back won or lost, and we want to send back what the computer picked and what we already know what the player picked, right? So we probably want to have an object that looks like this as our JSON. So we'll say like return object equals like get result, and it will be like won, lost, tie, and then computer was rock. So we'll send this back so that our JavaScript, and maybe we want to even include player, right? Like player paper. So that even though on the client side we know what we picked, like it's a nice idea to say like this is what we think it would help us debug. If we ever had a problem, we can be like, why is it saying I lost? Well, I mean, we might have been sending along something incorrect. So it's a good idea just to always send back what you were sent in the first place. Okay.
And it's good for those people who forget what they choose.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Like, I mean, we could have, in this, right, where we're already making the player choice, we got event.targetID. We can update the information on the page, right? We could say, even before, like, while that's happening in the background, what do we call this element? Game status, or we could do like span ID equals player choice. Span. We could do document.get element by ID player choice. .inner text equals player choice. Right? So when we're in here, like, you know, we can update the content with what button we've clicked. But when we're doing this like kind of game back and forth stuff, it's always a good idea to like let the JavaScript, like let the client side know what the server thought you picked, right? Because if I had sent something like undefined, for example, we sent undefined as a choice, and it keeps telling us we always lose, then we can examine the response that comes back from the server to let us know what we had actually picked, right? So anyway, back to where we were, right? So we need to write the functionality like this. Doesn't tell us if we won or lost, right? So we still have to write the functionality of the game to decide if we've won or lost. So I think it's probably a good idea, knowing that all of these are going to be the same, let's make a function. And we can write one good function and share it amongst all three choices. Okay? So let's maybe say function, paper, rock, scissors, choice. Cool. Yeah, and it's going to get rec and a res. All right. And then we'll say let computer choice equals this. Okay, the problem now, though, is that if each one of these is called by paper, rock, scissors, choice, right? If we do the same thing for rock and paper, right, and scissors, rock, and scissors, because we've written one function, we don't know which one of these we've called to, right? Except that if we do console.log rec, right, the rec object, that first argument knows our path name. So let's investigate that, and we'll just do res.json, and we'll just send an empty array back real quick. So let's take a look at that. We're running our server. We can reload this page and click paper. Right, so we made that request, and we can come in here and see this is our full request object. Right, so there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff in here. Let's just scroll all the way to the top and see if we see if we can find it. So this was the main request. Okay, URL. So URL tells us which one we picked. So we can do rec.url, I think. Was it inside of another thing? Let's just make sure we're good. Rec.url. Yeah. Should be fine. So let's test that. Let's console.log rec.url. And let's restart our server. Okay. And reload and click scissors. Yeah, and it tells us scissors. So now we know where we're at. Okay? So rec.url tells us we made scissors as our choice. So we just need to strip off that first letter. Does anyone remember how I can strip a letter off of, I can work with strings and just remove a letter?
Split.
Okay, split would be one good way, right? We could do let player choice equals rec.url .split, and we'll put slash, and then we probably want to do 1 so we can get the rest. Or we could have also used splice and do 1 right? Something like that. Or yeah, there's a bunch of different ways. So let's do your example. rec.url.split / and we'll say 1. Right. So now player choice has scissors, rock, or paper, and then computer choice has scissors, rock, or paper. So we need to say if. Let's make ourselves an object so we can start filling it up with stuff. So we'll say let results equals and we'll say player choice, computer choice, and then we're going to say result is null right now, or maybe we'll just make it tie by default. So it's always going to say tie, and then you're either going to win or lose. Okay. So if player, we can switch on this too, right? Like switch player choice. And we'll say case paper, case rock, case scissors, and if computer choice equals what is it? Scissors. Well, I don't like this. I don't like this way. We're gonna do it with this as a big if, right? So if player choice equals paper, else if player choice equals rock, else if player choice equals scissors. Okay, so those are our 3 options. The players pick one of these 3 things, and then we'll say if computer choice equals paper, or we just need to do rock. Paper beats rock, right? So results.result equals win, else if computer choice equals scissors, results.result equals loss. Okay. So that's one path. We can just copy this over so we don't have to keep typing everything. All right, bloop, and then bloop. Let's straighten this up. All right. So if the player picked rock and the computer picked paper or scissors, that's a win. Otherwise, if they picked paper, that's a loss. If they picked scissors and if the computer picked paper, it's a win. Otherwise, if they picked rock, it's a loss. Right? So those are the only 3 outcomes. And then everything else by default is going to be a tie. So we don't even care. So we'll just send out results as rec.json. Let's restart our server just to make sure that we have this code now. And then let's go take a look at it. Right? So let's clear everything out. Let's click paper. And let's look at the results. Okay, we picked paper. The computer picked rock, which resulted in a tie. That doesn't make sense, right? So if we pick paper, oh, because the computer's picking. Look, we made everything lowercase here, and we put it uppercase over here. So we are already saving ourselves some headache by displaying all the things that we know. So we gotta restart the server and clear. We click paper. Scissors, we lost. Paper again. Scissors, we lost. Sheesh. We tied. We tied. We tied. Are we ever going to win? Hey, there we go. We won finally. So everything's working, right? We got this object that comes back. It's JSON. To answer Andrew's question from earlier, the server is responding with application JSON, so we know that we can do stuff with this. Like JavaScript doesn't necessarily care about this, but other programming languages that are using APIs from the web do definitely care about the content type field. So because we know we're sending JSON, let's use that function. So now we're back into here, right? So what were our fields, right? We have a game status. Well, let's just copy this, right? Right. So we know we have just put this in here as comments so we don't have to keep flipping back and forth between tabs. And then we have a game history list where we want to store each and every one of these items. Okay, those are the 2 places that we need to update. So we need to have we win or lose in game status. All right, so let's start from that. We'll do document.getElement by ID game status dot inner HTML equals u plus and then we'll do this. Oh, we need to get the right. So we'll do let results equals this JSON dot parse this dot response text. Right, we got to turn it into a JavaScript object first, and we'll do results dot result. The next thing we need to do is player choice. So we're going to write this out nicely. Document.getElement by ID. Oh, we don't need player choice. We want game content. Player choice was just our little example. So we'll do game content dot inner HTML equals, and we're going to use this. So you picked. Oh, we'll wrap it in strong. You picked $ results dot player. Right, did we call it player? Yep, results dot player. Strong. The computer picked strong, and then we'll say results dot computer strong. Okay, so that one is taken care of. And now for game history list, we need to add a new li in here, right? So we want to be like, what do we have? You won or you lost with Paper Beats Rock. Right, so let's just give ourselves this format so we don't lose it. So we'll say document.getElement by ID game history list dot inner HTML equals, and I think I want the most recent result to be on the top. That to me seems maybe the most intuitive. So we'll do the result here, and so we'll say u results.result. Oh, we need to add it in an li as well, right? Like li and li u1, and then we'll say results dot player. Okay, so we need to have whatever beats the thing be first, right? Well, we probably even need to have some verbs like paper covers rock, rock crushes scissors, scissors cuts paper. So let's maybe add that to our game object. Let's just say verb. And maybe the default is null. I don't know. I don't like that. We're adding too much complexity. Let's just say, dash, and we'll say results.computer. Right, so just let's get this up and running and make sure we're happy. Okay, so I've got this string here that has an li in it, but at the end of it, I always want it to be at the top. So I'll do plus document.getElement by ID game history list dot inner HTML. Okay, so it's going to say the inner HTML is now this li at the top plus what was there before. So if I reload this page, right, and I click this, now all this stuff is updating, right? Except let's take out all of our old, all of our default information. So let's just take this out because we're not using it, and we'll maybe have game status start out with saying like select your choice from the buttons, right? And then we'll take out this one. So if I click paper, right? So our app loads, we've got 3 buttons: paper, rocket, scissors. Select your choice. I'm gonna click paper. You win. We picked paper, the computer picked rock. We get a list over here. Now let's pick rock. I won again. Computer picked scissors. We got a running history over here on the right. And we can just keep playing. Okay, interesting. We now see that there's a problem with our flex box here. We probably want to make it so that we like align these buttons to the top. That's annoying. So let's go back to CSS. And let's say align items top. Oh, that's even worse. What did we do? Oh no. Let's use our little built-in editor here. So whatever we're doing is bad. Flex. Oh, align items. Flex start. Yeah, flex start. Align items flex start is the correct answer. Flex start. Cool. All right, nice. Now, the only thing that drives me crazy here is that we probably need to add some padding and some, we might want to add some colors, like a win is a green, and a loss is a red, a tie is black. I don't know. But, like, we have a game. We built it. It's using Express. And so let's check in our stuff. We say fully implements paper, rock, scissors game in Express. Yes, stage our commits. Push. And we did this with very little lines of code. Like, this tells kind of what we're doing. We can even put in some comments in here. We'll say game routes contains all game logic for paper, rock, scissors. Right? It loads it. We have our static HTML being loaded, and we're listening on port 80. So all of the magic happens in our routes. Like, we put in comments here so that we could like know what we were going to write, but to me this is just as player choice is determined by the URL route. Right? We can maybe even leave an example of our return object. That's interesting. And we'll maybe say that's like return JSON object. But I mean, with very few lines of code, like 50 for the game, and a few to make a server, and some HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, we have a game. And now when we learn about databases next week, or 2 weeks, not only can we load this stuff here, right, we could store it in a server and get like overall, wins by over time or overall. We could make this multiplayer. So we could have something that says, I pick paper, Andrew, we're waiting on his thing, and as soon as he sends a choice, our server can respond and let us know who won. Can respond to both of us. So that's the power of Express. We've created an entire server that is letting us send requests to it, and it's deciding what to do and sending information back. And how long did that take us? About 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Now, it's ugly. We need to do some styling. We need padding in here. We want some colors, but we're at a stage where we have implemented something that we've implemented a few times now. Any questions about this? Anything you want to look over in more detail from our code? Go ahead.
So what's the difference between the game.js and prs.js?
Okay. Game.js is on the server side. This is running, this is Node. PRS.js is client side. This is running in the browser. Okay. The browser is the thing running this code. The server is running this code. Like if you come in here and we view page source, our browser is, when we click a button, we're sending that request to the server. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what's the difference between index.js and game.js?
Index.js is what we defined in our package JSON as the main script of this node package. This could have been anything. We could have called this app.js. It doesn't matter. This is the main program that we're writing. Game.js, we've defined, if we look in index.js, it's game routes. So we can write any number of scripts that we want in here, like, Express. We've pulled in Express. That is a node module, a node package. This is also a node module or package. They're just, this is a formally built one that comes from npm.org. This one is one that we've included in our directory, routes/game.js. The only, logically, you'd have to go and read this to say, what is that code doing, right? Because this code could have done anything, for all we know. Except we see it right below here, where it says, app.use game routes. So that kind of tells us this is probably a router. And if we went in here and looked, we could see, yes, this is indeed a router, right? It's defining 3 URL paths we're gonna take a look at. And then we're writing one big function that is the handler for these paths that is going to tell us if we've won or lost. Somebody was asking yesterday, what's the difference between a package and a module? And my answer was I just used to call them modules all the time from when I wrote a lot of Perl. But I just noticed that the folder that packages are stored in is modules, and package.json, so it's node modules. And then when we're in here, it's module.exports. So I think these are really modules. Let's call them modules.
Yeah, I noticed that too. There's it seems like
inconsistencies abound over here. So you can use them interchangeably. Probably a better definition would be everything here is a node module, but npm packages those up for us. So whatever. Software was written by humans who disagree over what to call things at times. So. Cool. Any questions about this? Cleans up our source code. Push.
I think before, when I was confused about why we could only get data when you change the URL and stuff. I think I've always associated with a URL changing as you loading a whole other page, but
yeah,
I guess you don't have to do that.
You do not, but that's really what it's doing, right? Think of each request, or the URL is the life. You know how we've been learning to use functions, where we say when you call this function, it's going to run all these lines of code. At a higher level, at a level of abstraction above us, right, as a web server, when you call, slash, here, let's pull up our example from the other day. What was that fake JSON API thing, right? When we call albums, for example, this is a resource that is returning content to us. And from the time we call albums, it's like calling a function, and it's going to give us back whatever it is that comes through this. Whether, if this was a file, right, like index.html, as soon as this file is sent, the function is over. It's like, you know how when we're in a function, we say return whatever? That's what res.send or res.json is doing. It's saying, return this out of. So think of each URL or each route as a function of a web server. Because each individual client, the client is the browser or the users, they're all a bunch of different people around the world. They're all at different places. So the whole point of web service is to take the request, send the content out as quickly as possible so it can close the connection and listen. If Andrew and Lee are both trying to get the same resource, you're both trying to go to index.html, the server wants to send that as fast as possible. So Andrew goes there first, he gets the file. The quicker we can be done sending the file, then Leah gets the file. All right. Any questions? Okay, it is 7:46. Let's take our final break of the day, and then we'll use the last hour to just review and just kind of go over some more. We've covered a lot, and we still have more to go. One of the things that we have not covered is templating languages. I'm happy to show you some, but that's even more complexity. So I want to make sure that we really understand this stuff before we move on to something crazier. Okay, 7:47. Let's come back at 8 and enjoy our last hour together. Just to give you a sneak preview of kind of where we're going with this, and one of the things that makes Node.js and this type of build environment super possible and super exciting is that in about 30 seconds on our break, I deployed this project to a server, and it's now running on paperrockscissors.herokuapp.com. So there's a really cool hosting provider that is called Heroku, that when we upload a module that uses Node or Express, it knows how to run that and serve that content out for us and give us a URL. And deploying this to Heroku is extremely simple. It's one line of code using Git, right? So we can add ourselves a remote, Git, remote, add Heroku app, Heroku, and then we put in a Heroku Git address, and then when we do Git push, let's make a change so it will actually do this. Let's say added one line. We'll do git add dot git commit dash m showing off Heroku. Git push origin main, right? That's what we do to deploy to GitHub, to send it to GitHub. But Heroku is exactly the same way. Git push Heroku main. And it's going to send it to Heroku and build the source code, install the node packages, and then start serving this content. So all the stuff we've been doing behind the scenes, they've automated it and deployed it to a URL that they'll give us at the end. Pretty cool, huh? So this is the kind of thing that we're going to do in 3 weeks from now when we start learning about servers and infrastructure and deploying things. We're going to use Heroku a couple times. Cool. That tells you, hey, this has been deployed to Heroku, and we can watch with Heroku. We can say logs kale. And this is it's telling us this was the log file from Heroku. This server is running. If I click reload over here, we can see here's the web request we made, all the IP addresses and all that sort of stuff. And if we, let's make this smaller, right? I'm going to click scissors, right? You're going to see it makes the request to scissors, and it's doing our console.logging. So app, the blue lines is our console.logs. But it's saying get path game paper, and then we can see our app console.log paper. So this is really cool. I mean, this is one of the neat things about Node.js specifically, but kind of the modern world we live in. We spent an hour building a website, and with one line of code, where git push Heroku main, we've deployed it to a server, and it's running and visible for the whole world to see. Go ahead, Gregory. You're muted.
I was about to ask, does GitHub provide the same as Heroku?
Nope.
So you cannot upload a live server to GitHub?
No, you cannot. You can do GitHub provides us GitHub pages, which is what we've been using for our portfolios. But that's just going to serve static HTML content. Heroku is a cloud hosting provider that is running our source code, running a node module. We can connect to databases and do stuff, and we get this is basically a server. Now, this is the free version, right? You wouldn't want to build a business running off of the free version of Heroku, but you can pay for more droplets or whatever Heroku calls them, and this could be ready for prime time, and you could actually build and launch a business. I know a lot of companies, rather than worrying about building a server infrastructure, they'll use Heroku and pay for it to scale with them. And then when you reach some certain size where it probably doesn't make sense to use Heroku anymore, then you would transition to AWS or Google or running your own servers. Cool. Anyway, we will learn this in about 3 weeks. All right. What do we want to talk about for the last hour? Is there anything you'd like to go over more? Maybe making classes, making node modules, making Express? What we'd like to talk about. This is your time.
Can we go over more Express? Because it's not clicking to my head no matter how many times you explain it.
Which part would you like to go over?
The part with
I saw Leah shaking or nodding her head as well. Is there something you can think of, Leah, that maybe just isn't clicking quite as well?
I was just curious in the rock paper scissors app, how much of it is like Node in general, and how much of it is specifically Express.
Can you go back to your code real quick?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. All right, so here's the code. This is our main Node program. It is a simple program. It's pulling in the Express module, creating an Express object, and then we've defined some routes to listen to. We are telling it that those routes are under /game, and that we are also going to look at a folder called HTML, and if there's a file in there that matches, send that. This is the entire Express program, or Node program. This is all Node, but we are building an Express program in Node. We're using Express as like our main thing. Express is just a web server module or package.
So, like, what code here relies on Express?
This does, this does, this does, all of it, all 6 lines. Yep, it starts from here. That requires Express. We have to install the npm module. This is actually using this that we just created. This does not require Express, but when we go into that file, we see that this is just Express code, right? We're doing the same thing here, but we're using the router itself to then set up these. So the only things that don't require Express is like this. But the problem is, if you notice, this is a function that is using the Express request and response objects. So this function was built to use Express. This line of code, I guess, is the only thing in here that is not Express. This is native Node. We're telling it this is for the require function to work. These two files are the whole program, and we built an entire web server that is either going to serve HTML content or is going to play a game with us and is going to return JSON. Like, if you come in here and look at this, right, you can see even this one that's deployed to Heroku, when I click paper, it's making a request to erhpaperrockscissors.herokuapp.com/game/paper and is responding with that object that we're sending back. So this is just JSON. And we've done that before. We were doing it with, when we were working with static files and things, we used it with the API, that fake API we were building, that all of the front end stuff, the index.html, the CSS, and the JavaScript, prs.js, that's all client side. But everything else is a Node app and is Express specifically. What else? If you exclude these 2 lines of code, or these, let's take that out, right? Like, this is all you need to make Express work and serve out HTML content. These 4 lines of code, and I'm doing something fancy here for Heroku's purpose, because Heroku is running some load balancer in front of it, and so it's telling our app, hey, I'm going to take all the requests to port 80, and then I'm going to send requests to you on port 5000 or whatever port it decides to send to us. But that's something that Heroku will tell us what to do. But those 4 lines of code are all you need to make Express work. And to be honest, like, you don't even need this one. This one just tells us, like, if there's files to load it. Express just needs, we got to require the module, create the app object, and then listen on a port. What else? Andrew.
I could always go over more stuff with classes.
Okay.
Let's just.
So we built this beautiful paper rock scissors game. Let's make this a class instead of just having our Express route handler decide if we won or lost. Maybe that's the next good step. All right. So we're gonna do something kind of cool here. Yeah. So let's just copy this whole thing. Right? These are pretty good. Let's make ourselves a new Node module have it be a class, and then have this game use that class. Okay. So I'm gonna cd dot dot. I'm gonna make dir paper rock scissors game. I'm gonna cd to it. Nope. Paper rock scissors game. npm init. Yep. Good. Yep. Index.js. That's fine. Eric Harrison. Oh, you know what? We should let's do this from GitHub first. We want this to be a so let's c dot dot rm-rf paper rock scissors game. Okay. Let's go make ourselves a GitHub repository. Oh. And we can do this pretty quickly, I bet. Let's see. Paper rock scissors game. Okay. Class for paper rock scissors game. Public, great. Get ignore, node. Add a readme. Yes. We'll copy the class, or we'll copy the URL. We'll do git clone, git clone. Oof. It's been a long day, huh? CD into it. Paper rock scissors game. npm init to turn it into an npm. Right, good. Good. Game class for paper rock scissors. Index.js, great. Now it's got a repository. We're good. Keywords to Eric Harrison. Yes, everything's good. All right. So why I need to make an npm module or GitHub for this first? Because if I want to be able to continue to deploy this to Heroku, I need to have a GitHub URL so that they can run npm install and get this class, get this package we're building. Okay. So let's open up Visual Studio Code. We'll pull in a new window. I'll delete you. We'll say File, Open Folder, CBC 12. So we got a server, and now we're going to make a game class. Okay. So I'm going to make index.js. Right, that's the main thing. Cool. So we have. Let's get that code that we had before. That was. This is good. Right. We can make our own class. We don't need to copy code from anywhere. So right, we start off with class. Paper, rock, scissors. Cool. We know that we want this to be a module, so we'll do module.exports equals paper, rock, scissors. So this is all we need to be really up and running, right? But we'll do constructor. Constructor. And we'll say, player choice comes in as the thing, and we need a this dot results. Equals this dot. How do we want to do this? All right, let's think about it. Let's think about this structurally. Let's say create main class. Do we want to just create the object and then let's do that, right? So we already structured our website to be like we're going to /paper /rock /scissors. So let's have our object do the same thing, right? So by default it says this dot player choice equals null. This dot computer choice equals null, and then we'll say this dot results. This dot result equals. We can make this tie again. Right, that was a pretty good choice of ours. All right, so we'll do function paper. Right, the computer has player has picked paper. Great. So we need to also have probably need to have like this dot choices equals an array, and we'll do paper, rock, scissors. Okay. All right, cool. So we need to do let this. Oh, we can just assign it directly to it. This dot computer choice equals math.floor math.random times this dot choices dot length. Right, same thing we were doing before, and we need to we need to put this in square brackets. And we do this dot choices. Right? So we're going to pick one of those choices using a random number between 0 and 3. Oh, 0 and 2. All right, great. So we got the computer choice, and we'll say this dot player choice equals paper in this case. Okay. So this, these lines of code are all we need to do this, right? Now, what jumps out at me as a class, building a class like this, right? Paper probably should be a function that calls something that, like, I'm writing the same line of code 3 times. That jumps out at me as like, this is wrong. So let's just maybe have a thing that says like game player choice that does this computer choice there, and this dot player choice equals player choice. And now I can just say this dot game paper. Okay. Same here. So we'll say rock. Okay, and then scissors. This dot game scissors. Okay, so now we have 3 functions that all call one function with the content we passed, but we need to return something, right? We need to return like some game results. So let's just say we're going to return whatever this game returns. Okay. Because we know we want player choice, computer choice, and the result object, win or loss, because that's what our web app is using. So we need to just come in here and say let's copy all that code that we wrote before, because it's a whole bunch of if-then statements, right? So we'll just go bloop. Excuse me, copy, and we'll say, right there. So if this dot player choice, this dot, right, this dot, this dot, this dot, this dot, this dot, and this dot. Okay, and we also see that we have a, this is putting back results, so we probably want to do the same thing here. So we'll do, let's just do let's results equals an array, or an object, and we say player, this dot player choice, and computer, this dot computer choice. Okay, now the one problem is, you notice I created this here, but I haven't picked those yet, so let's just move this down. Okay. And then, we've got results dot result equals win. So we make this result is tie, right? Or we can just say this dot result. This dot result. And so the default is that. Okay. So everything that we had before, now we have here in a class. And then the very last thing we need to do is return it. Return results. So we have a class. It has a constructor. It sets a few default values. And then we have a game function, a method of this class that takes a player choice and picks a computer choice, assigns the player choice to the property of the instance, and then returns it back. And then at the very end, the last thing we've done in this file is say, hey, module exports paper, rock, scissors, right? So that it's, if we do npm install, right, we can do require paper, rock, scissors, and we can create, and we'll see that here very shortly. So let's just verify this all works before we toot our own horns too much. So let's do this in here. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger for us. So we can run node, and we'll say var, no, let's just const paper, rock, scissors equals require, and we'll just say .index.js, right? Because we're already in this folder. Let's just require that script and make sure that it's working correctly. Okay, and then we could do let game equals new paper, rock, scissors, and then we can say game dot paper, computer choice is not defined. So we have a bug here, and it's telling us the bug is at line 24. Let's go to line 24. Oh, we missed one of our thises. This. Right? So now we're good. Let us restart this, and we'll say const PRS equals require index.js, and we'll say let game equals new PRS. Game.paper. And we can see player pick paper, computer pick rocked, we won. Cool. And let's pick paper again. We won again. Now we tied. Now we tied. Now we lost. And all of those, we could test all these things. So like rock. Cool. Scissors. Cool. And we can also test the game itself, right? Let's pass something in. Paper. And let's just for the sake of testing, okay. Undefined, computer pick paper, it was a tie. So we have some like things that we probably would want to invest some time in our class to make it a little bit more robust. But we're in a good state. Like this is good enough for now. So I'm happy with this. Let's check this into GitHub. Let's say first version of paper, rock, scissors, game, class. Okay. Yes. Push. Okay. Now what we want to do is go back to our server and rip out all the code we were doing before. So all of this can be gone. Perfect. All of this can be gone. Right? And all we really care about is what was the endpoint, what was the player's choice. So let's do this. Let's say const paper, rock, scissors equals require paper, rock, scissors. What do we call it? Game. Yep. That's the name of our node package. And then in here we'll say let game equals new paper, rock, scissors. And we'll say return, or let's even do this. Let's do res.json game player choice. Player choice. Right? We already have paper, rock, and scissors in the player choice variable. And we don't know, like, paper and rock and scissors is the value here, but we can't easily call that this way. We could, but that's extra. But we have a game function that takes a string, paper, rock, or scissors, that returns the object we were doing down here. So let's take this out, put a semicolon in here. Now, we are going to have to install this, so let's make sure we did push it. So we'll do npm install CBC 12 instructor / paper, rock, scissors, game. It's going to install that module for us. It's going to put it in our package.json. Right, there it is. It's telling us where it's at. And now, if we run this, right, node index.js, and we go to localhost, this should still all work, right? But now it's using a class. Oh, I went to the wrong. It's port 5000 now. Yeah, cool. Just bring up our developer tools to make sure we're working correctly. Let's click scissors. We tie, computer pick scissors. Let's pick it again. Scissors, paper, we won, right? So now we're working. We made a brand new node module, and that node module, or that package, whatever you want to call it, is just a class, and the class contains one major method, 3 little helper methods, and a constructor. And all it does is return the results object, which is like this. And then we are exporting that so that anybody that uses require and puts in our package name can now create a new paper, rock, scissors game object. Does that help a little bit, Andrew? Running through it? I mean, it's really hard to like say this is what you should always do, because so much of this is your choice. Like how you design your programs is this. Like this is the fun of software development, is you get to be in charge. As long as you're aware of how to create a class, how to use a constructor, and what does a method look like. In the context of Node, The only thing that matters is, if you're going to use the require function, you have to remember to module that exports it.
Yeah, that definitely helps. I'm just trying to get more in the mindset of trying to think rather in terms of just a bunch of functions, but rather just how you seem to abstract everything, and I'm trying to get into that mindset of making things reusable.
I try whenever possible not to prematurely abstract things. So I like to just build things to work quickly, verify that it's working the way I want, and then think of ways to abstract it or refactor it to be more reusable. Just because often you'll do this refactoring prematurely and spend a bunch of time making sure you got your class names correctly and thinking through what is everything. It's like, that's too much. Just make it work first and then figure out if you're going to keep doing it. Cool. What else? We could also do this without using game routes. Right. Maybe I'll show you that real quick. We could also say const paper, rock, scissors is require paper, rock, scissors, game. And then I can say var, and let's do let game equals new paper, rock, scissors. Okay. And then we can also write, instead of app.useGame, right? This is our fancy routing that lets us separate everything out. But we know we only need 3 routes. So maybe in this example, trying not to over-optimize and not prematurely spending time, I might just come in and say app.get, game paper function res rec, rec res, and then I would do res.json game.game paper. Now I would do the same thing for rock and scissors. Rock, scissors, rock. Right, like, this is an example of, like, I would build this exact thing first. I only have 3 paths, 3 routes that I care about. It's a real simple game. I'm not going to bring in an express router and put it in a separate script. I'm going to build the simplest possible thing first, and if we run this, right? Look at our code, right? It's working. I just wanted to show off, like, when you're actually working on apps or projects, almost always they're going to be complex enough that you're going to want to do this. Almost always. But I'll leave this in here so we can have it as an example. And I probably would not, I mean, we started, to answer Andrew's question, like, we started with this being a big if-then block down here. I don't know if I would ever make this a class. Maybe. For a game this simple, but I would definitely start with, like, let me just figure out the gameplay first, and if I needed to make it a class, maybe, like, when we start learning databases next week, we want the paper, rock, scissors game class to, like, store our results long term. So maybe then I would convert it to it. So maybe making it a class first is a good idea for us. It almost always comes down to, like, if at all possible, and this is best practice. I mean, you're going to see this in your careers as well. You're going to design what you're going to build before you build it. Most of the time, it's going to be a design diagram where you're going to have requirements for what you're expected to build, kind of like our homework, where it'll be like, you must do this, you must do that, it must have this, it must have that. This big list of requirements will kind of tell you what you need to build. But regardless of if you have requirements or things like that or not, you should definitely get in the habit of like think about what you're going to build first, because it will help you save more time if you even just sketch something out on paper, write some notes for yourself, so that you go into this with a plan.
Are we gonna have any homework over the break?
That was one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. So I think everybody should have a break, but also this is a 12-week course that is moving very quickly. At this stage, you should have a portfolio that you're starting to get very proud of, that should have at least the first app you guys have built, and I would very highly and strongly encourage you to build a second app over the break that you can then include in your portfolio. And examples of great apps would be build your own version of this paper, rock, scissors game. That's an app. You could do that in a day, hopefully. I mean, you saw we did this in 45 minutes. Obviously, you're going to have to go a little bit slower, but you should be able to do this in a day. A to-do list app would be a good one, right? That's generic enough that everyone can look at your code and be like, oh yeah, I understand what's going on here. Those are two simple ones. Or you could think of a third one. Like, think of things that are concrete, simple examples that just show off your capabilities. Like paper, rock, scissors is a great one because you get to show off your server, and you could theoretically, if you made it into a class, show off your class in your portfolio. So when we get to next week, and I don't know if anyone's got travel plans. I don't want to say like you should definitely spend all day at your computer, but you should definitely next week be starting to feel like it's time to start job searching soon, because that's the state we're gonna start getting into. And the more stuff that you have packaged and ready to go, the less of a scramble you're going to have in 5 weeks from now. So definitely have LinkedIn portfolio page up. Definitely have a portfolio ready to go. Definitely have 3 to 4 things in your portfolio, and if you need to build those things, the next week is going to be your best chance to do it. I am not going anywhere. I'm taking off of work because I don't have class, and it's like my only break this entire summer. So ping me on Slack if you need help or have questions. I'm around. But I would encourage you, I don't know if you remember Mike Wales way back in week 4 said your career belongs to you. Like we're setting you up for success, but here in like 6-7 weeks it's going to be you guys on your own going out interviewing things. So start bundling and packaging the things you need: resume, portfolio page, LinkedIn profile, have some projects to show off. So I'm more than happy to release that as homework and include like a list of 5 things you should have ready for next week.
Can we schedule office hours on this upcoming Friday?
Absolutely.
Okay. Already made a list.
Cool. Well, I'll release some homework, and I'm gonna mark it due as Monday. And what we'll do, maybe when we come back, just to get back in the rhythm of being in class, we'll spend like the first hour showing off everything that we've got. So just be ready to like pretend if it's like a mock interview where you're gonna be like, I am Leah, and here's my portfolio, here's my LinkedIn profile. Make yourself presentable for a hiring manager. Don't make yourself presentable and like I expect you to dress up, but just like start thinking of yourself as a product that's being sold, because that's what companies are buying from you. Is I'm hiring an engineer, I want to buy Leah or Andrew or Gregory, and every once in a while you can convince them to buy an Eric if you sweet talk them enough. Okay, I'll release that as notes. The more you can build on your build 20 apps if you can. You'll be in a better position. You'll understand this more than people who are spending the whole weekend grilling burgers and shooting fireworks. And practice good firework discipline and safety. Right? Don't come back with your fingers all blown off. It's hard to type with no fingers. What other questions?